Some of the most haunting stories don't come from abandoned buildings, cemeteries, or the echo of footsteps in an empty hallway. Some of the most haunting stories come from real lives, ordinary families, isolated farms, quiet desert roads, and the moments where the world simply stopped making sense. If you've ever felt a chill walking past a darkened window, or sensed a presence lingering just beyond the edge of logic, then you already know this. Monsters don't only exist in nightmares. Sometimes they walk up a snow-covered path. Sometimes they slip through an unlocked door. Sometimes they bury their secrets beneath miles of shifting sand. Tonight, we aren't telling ghost stories. We aren't diving into superstition or campfire tales meant to entertain. These are true events, cases where brutality met mystery, where evidence contradicted itself, and where the final answers never came. A family slaughtered in their farmhouse, while someone moved in the attic above them. A killer in Tokyo who left behind his DNA, his clothes, his blood, but not his identity. 11 victims uncovered in a silent stretch of desert, their killer long vanished into the horizon. These aren't stories about the supernatural. They're stories about people. People capable of violence, of deception, of disappearing into the fabric of society without ever being recognized for what they are. Tonight, we step into the places where logic unravels, where investigators hit walls of silence, and where the truth is forced to become a ghost. Not because it never existed, but because someone made sure it stayed buried. Turn your lights down. Turn your volume up. And remember, the scariest mysteries aren't the ones without answers, but the ones where the answers are still out there, walking among us. Story 1. Hinterkaifeck. In late March of 1922, on a lonely farmstead in Bavaria, Germany, a family was being watched. That's not an embellishment. It's taken directly from the preserved accounts in the Hinterkaifeck archives, which detail how the Gruber's maid left her position because she swore she heard footsteps in the attic. Imagine being alone at night, the farmhouse creaking, and knowing with absolute certainty that someone was pacing above your head. According to her own testimony, she refused to stay another night. She packed her things and left the farm behind. The farm was known as Hinterkaifeck, a few miles outside the village of Gruber. 6 people lived there in 1922. Andreas Gruber, 63, his wife, Cecilia, 72, their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, widowed and only 35. Victoria's 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph, and the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had just arrived the very day of the murders. The farm sat alone, isolated, a full half-mile away from its nearest neighbor, with a dark forest pressing close behind it. Locals often commented that the Grubers were both respected and feared. Andreas, especially, was known for his sternness and sometimes violent temper. The Hinterkaifeck.net archive and police reports make it clear that strange things were happening in the days before the killings. Andreas Gruber told neighbors he found footprints in the fresh snow leading from the forest toward the farmhouse and none leading back out again. He checked the barn, the shed, the attic. He found nothing. And yet, doors were found unlocked. Tools had been moved. A newspaper appeared on the farm that no one in the family subscribed to. These aren't myths. These are recorded in the investigative files and reprinted by the Bavarian State Criminal Office decades later. Andreas confided his concerns, but refused outside help. He told neighbors he could defend his family himself. And so, they stayed. And so did whoever was lurking. That Friday, life seemed ordinary. Victoria and her daughter attended school and church duties earlier in the week. Maria Baumgartner was dropped off by her sister that afternoon to start her first shift as the new maid. She likely spent that evening unpacking, preparing dinner, perhaps listening to the quiet sighs of the wind through the cracks of the farmhouse. By nightfall, the family had settled in, unaware that someone perhaps already inside, perhaps hiding in the shadows of the barn, was preparing to annihilate them. What happened next is reconstructed from the forensic reports and court physician Johann Baptist Aumüller's autopsy notes. The killer, it seems, managed to lure family members out into the barn one by one. Perhaps a disturbance among the cattle drew Andreas out first. He was struck in the head with a heavy mattock, a farm tool, like a pickaxe. Then Cecilia, his wife, followed. Then Victoria. Then little Cecilia. the 7-year-old child. Each was struck down in turn, their skulls shattered, their bodies dragged into the hay. Forensic records describe them as being stacked, almost ritualistically, one atop the other, covered in straw. When the autopsy was performed, it was discovered that young Cecilia had torn out clumps of her own hair before dying, suggesting she lay alive and terrified for hours after the attack. Inside the farmhouse, 2 more victims awaited. The toddler Joseph was murdered in his crib, his head crushed by blows, and Maria, the maid who had only just arrived that day, was killed in her bed. This detail of Maria's murder on her first night of work is preserved in nearly every historical account, from the original police files to the modern compendiums like Hinterkaifeck.net. It makes the entire case feel cursed. Imagine arriving at your new job, and within hours, you are gone forever. It took days for the crime to be discovered. On Sunday, April 2nd, the family was absent from church, which raised questions. On Monday and Tuesday, neighbors grew more concerned. Milk deliveries weren't picked up, school children hadn't attended classes, the farm seemed eerily alive yet empty. Smoke still rose from the chimney. The cattle were lowing, restless, but no one answered at the door. Finally, on April 4th, neighbors broke into the barn. What they found was unspeakable. 4 bodies stacked in straw, blood pooled in dark stains. Inside the farmhouse, they found Maria and Joseph. Word spread quickly, and soon curious villagers trampled through the scene. Some cooked meals in the kitchen, others handled tools. Investigators later wrote in frustration that the crime scene was ruined before it was ever properly examined. The Bavarian police launched one of the largest investigations in German history at the time. Hundreds of suspects were interviewed, yet the crime scene yielded little beyond horror. The weapon in the attic wasn't discovered until the farm was demolished a year later, hidden in the attic, as if mocking the family's fears about footsteps above their heads. Autopsies were performed right there in the barn, and the heads of the victims were severed and sent to Munich for study by clairvoyants, a desperate attempt at psychic divination that, of course, yielded nothing. Those skulls were later lost during World War II bombings. Theories proliferated. The closest neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, had once been romantically involved with Victoria. Some suspected he fathered Joseph. He was also among the first to enter the farm after the murders, unlocking doors and handling bodies. According to witness testimony recorded at the time, he seemed disturbingly comfortable, even smoking a pipe as the corpses lay in front of him. Was he guilty? Police could never prove it, and Schlittenbauer later sued for slander, winning damages. Others looked further afield. The Gump brothers, tied to extremist Freikorps militias, were rumored to have confessed before one was executed in 1951. Another theory emerged decades later in the book The Man from the Train by Bill James, suggesting an itinerant killer who committed similar family murders in America might have crossed into Europe. The similarities are haunting. Families slaughtered at night, bodies stacked, blunt farm tools as weapons, little theft. Yet no hard evidence connects the cases. And then there are the wilder theories that Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, presumed dead in World War I, had actually survived and returned in secret to murder his family. That idea lingers in folklore but remains unsupported. What truly haunts this case isn't just the murders, but what came after. The Hinterkaifeck archives note that neighbors swore they saw smoke from the chimney days after the killings. The cattle had been fed. Bread had been cut from the pantry. Someone lived in the house after the family was dead. That detail is what makes Hinterkaifeck one of the most chilling unsolved cases in history. It wasn't just a spree killing. It was a trespass of life itself. The killer didn't just destroy the family, they replaced them, even if only for a few nights. In 1923, the farm was demolished. During the destruction, workers found the murder weapon hidden in the attic and a penknife in the hay. A simple memorial cross was erected near the site of the barn. To this day, people leave flowers there. The case remains unsolved. The investigative files are preserved, with over 100 suspects considered, but no resolution ever reached. And the heads of the victims lost forever in the chaos of war mean that forensic re-examination is impossible. The footsteps in the attic, the footprints that led in but never out, the cattle fed while the family lay dead. These are the details that endure because they come directly from the records, written down by neighbors, police, and doctors in 1922. And they leave us with the question darker than any answer. Was the killer already inside all along? The silence of Hinterkaifeck has lasted for over a century, and in that silence, the sound of those attic steps still echoes. Story 2. Setagaya. Tokyo, December 30th, 2000, the last night of the millennium's first year. Streets in Setagaya Ward were quiet, children asleep, families preparing for New Year. But inside one home, near the edge of Setagaya Park, the Miyazawa family faced something unspeakable. 4 lives would end in violence, so brutal and so strange that, even today, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department still publishes the suspect's clothes, DNA profile, and plea for information on their official case site. The family was ordinary, even warm. Mikio, a 44-year-old employee of Interbrand, his wife, Yasuko, 41, a teacher, their daughter Niina, 8, and son Rei, 6. Their house sat against Setagaya Park, a modern home split into 2 halves, one for the Miyazawas, the other for Yasuko's mother and sister. According to the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department's case poster, the killer used this layout to his advantage. Between 11:30 p.m. and 12 a.m., the intruder likely climbed up the fence by the park, stepping onto the air conditioning unit, and forced his way through a small bathroom window on the 2nd floor. The TMPD's crime scene diagram shows the screen was cut neatly and set aside. This was no random smash and grab. The killer entered like a shadow. Inside, he struck first at Rei, the 6-year-old boy asleep in his room. Forensic reports, summarized in both the TMPD release and case compendiums, say Rei was strangled in his bed. Moments later, Mikio confronted the intruder on the stairs. A fight broke out, fierce enough that neighbors later told police they heard banging and a thud. Mikio was stabbed with a sashimi knife brought by the killer, the blade shattering inside his skull. Undeterred, the intruder seized a Santoku kitchen knife from the house and used it to murder Yasuko and little Niina. The autopsies confirm multiple stab wounds to mother and child, some delivered with extraordinary violence, and then silence. But instead of fleeing into the night, the killer stayed. And this is what makes the Setagaya case so deeply disturbing. The Tokyo Police's official appeal, updated even in recent years, lists the details. He drank 4 bottles of barley tea, ate ice cream and melon from the refrigerator, bandaged his wounds using the family's first aid kit, and even used the toilet without flushing. He logged onto the family's computer at 1:18 a.m., opening a folder, clicking through files, and leaving digital footprints. He dumped papers in the bathtub, ransacked drawers, and may have napped on the sofa. Hours passed with 4 corpses in the house, while the killer lived like a resident. The next morning, at 10:40 a.m., Yasuko's mother, who lived in the adjoining half of the house, entered through the front door after phone calls went unanswered. What she found was devastating. Her daughter, her son-in-law, and both grandchildren murdered. The police arrived, and within hours, the crime scene became one of Japan's most infamous mysteries. The killer left behind an astonishing amount of evidence. The TMPD's case page itemizes it. A rare sweatshirt sold in limited quantities, only 130 pieces nationwide. Slazenger shoes, Korean-made, size 27.5 centimeters. 2 black handkerchiefs, one stained with blood and traces of cologne, Dracar Noir, a French brand. A black hip bag containing sand, later traced to 2 very different places. A Japanese skate park and the Nevada desert near Edwards Air Force Base. And most damning of all, his DNA. Samples showed blood type A, with a Y chromosome haplogroup common in East Asia. Forensic genealogical analysis even suggested maternal ancestry from Southern Europe, perhaps Italy. These strange genetic contradictions have fueled theories ever since. The TMPD launched Operation Roller, fingerprinting and DNA testing thousands of men in the area. They pursued every possible lead youths Mikio had argued with in the park. Foreign military connections, former associates, drifters. By 2015, the case file had grown to over 246,000 investigative actions. Each December, the police set up displays near Seijo Gakuen-mei Station with mannequins dressed in the killer's clothes, asking commuters, "Do you recognize these garments? Did you see someone like this that night?" This is not rumor, it's documented on the department's own website. Writers and investigators have put forward suspects. One Japanese crime author referred cryptically to a man known only as R, a former South Korean soldier. Others speculate the sand in the killer's bag points to a U.S. military base connection. Still others suggest he was a young skater, based on his shoes and the nearby park. The police themselves revised their age estimate in 2018, saying he might have been only 15 to 22 at the time. But none of these theories have led to an arrest. What terrifies people most isn't the brutality of the murders, but what happened after. The killer treated the house as his own. He ate, he drank, he bled, he slept. He sat at the family computer, moving the mouse with bloodied fingers. He left his DNA everywhere, as if mocking the very idea of secrecy. The TMPD has always stressed this point. This was not a typical burglary or a clean escape. This was an occupation. In 2010, the statute of limitations for capital crimes was abolished in Japan, influenced, in part, by public outrage over this case. The house, for years left standing as evidence, became infamous, even attracting thrill-seekers and trespassers. Only in recent years did authorities finally allow its demolition. And yet, the case remains active. Each December, Tokyo police renew their appeals. On their website today, you can still see photos of the clothing, the bag, the knives, the handkerchiefs. The reward remains posted. The family's surviving relatives continue to attend memorial services. 25 years have passed, but the official message has not changed. If you know anything, contact us. Imagine it. A killer who does not flee, but stays. Who eats the last of your food, uses your bathroom, clicks through your computer files, and then walks away into the night, leaving behind everything but his name. That's why, even in a city as vast as Tokyo, the Setagaya murders feel intimate, suffocating, like the killer is still sitting in the next room. And as the police posters remind us, his belongings are still waiting to be recognized. His DNA is still on file. And somewhere in Tokyo, or perhaps far beyond, the man who lived in that house all night is still alive. West Mesa. February 2nd, 2009. A woman named Christine Ross takes her dog, Ruka, for a walk on Albuquerque's West Mesa. The land is dry, empty, dotted with scrub and sand. Suddenly, Ruka digs up a bone. Christine takes a photo, realizing it looks human, and calls the police. That phone call, according to the City of Albuquerque Police Department's official case timeline, would open one of the darkest chapters in New Mexico history. Because the desert was hiding bodies. 11 women and 1 unborn child. Over the next weeks, police unearthed shallow graves across a 92-acre site. They brought in the FBI. They used aerial photography. They cross-referenced the missing persons reports. By March, they had matched remains to women who had vanished between 2001 and 2005. According to APD's public homicide page, the last grave was dug in 2005. Satellite images even showed disturbed soil and tire tracks from those years. These were their names: Monica Candelaria, 22, Victoria Chavez, 26, Selania Edwards, only 15, a runaway from Oklahoma, Doreen Marquez, 24, Veronica Romero, 28, Jamie Barella, 15, Evelyn Salazar, 27, Virginia Cloven, 24, Julie Nieto, 24, Cinnamon Elks, 32, Michelle Valdez, 22 and 4 months pregnant. Their identities come directly from the official case releases and are repeated every anniversary by Albuquerque's local press. Most were young Latina women, many struggling with addiction or involved in sex work. Some had been missing for years without urgent investigation. Their disappearances were invisible until the Mesa gave them back. Detectives pursued several leads. One was Lorenzo Montoya, who lived just 3 miles away. In 2006, he lured a teenager into his home, strangled her, and was shot dead by her boyfriend in self-defense. After his death, the disappearances seemed to stop. Was Montoya the West Mesa bone collector? Police have never proven it. Another was Joseph Blia, known as the mid-school rapist. Convicted of multiple sexual assaults, Blia had ties to the area, and according to APD, a tree tag found near the burial site matched a nursery he frequented. Investigators also discovered women's jewelry and underwear in his home, but again, no charges were ever brought for the West Mesa murders. Other names: surface pimps, traffickers, even out-of-state killers. But officially, as the APD repeats on its website, the case remains unsolved. The killer chose the mesa for a reason: vast, empty, under development at the time. In fact, APD investigators note that housing construction had begun in the mid-2000s. Retaining walls and roads were laid. But when the 2008 housing crash stopped construction, the land was abandoned. Erosion and wind exposed bones that might have remained hidden forever. The killer had gambled that the future would bury his crimes. Instead, economic collapse unearthed them. Detective Ida Lopez became a central figure in the case. Years earlier, she had compiled a list of missing women from Albuquerque's streets, women vulnerable to trafficking, addiction, poverty. When the bones were found, many matched the names on her list. Lopez has spoken about the heartbreak of watching her list become a graveyard. The FBI brought ground-penetrating radar, anthropologists sifted the soil, and the city posted a $100,000 reward, still active today. This case is terrifying because of what it says about invisibility. The killer didn't need brilliance. He didn't need elaborate cover stories. He knew society was already looking away. The victims were women who could disappear without headlines, whose families' pleas were often ignored. And he buried them in plain sight, shallow graves that blended into desert sand, waiting for the next subdivision. The mesa became his accomplice. The silence of the desert, the neglect of the city, the storms that shifted the earth. Each grave was a statement. No one will come looking. Every February, APD holds a memorial. The city posts reminders, the hotline number, the reward. The case remains open, and legislation for expanded DNA testing is often discussed in its shadow. Families of the victims continue to demand justice. 15 years have passed. The desert is still there, flat and endless, a place where the wind erases footprints in minutes. But beneath it, the ghosts of 11 women and one unborn child remain. The city of Albuquerque's case page still asks the same question: do you know something? Somewhere, someone remembers a car, a night, a voice, a shovel. Somewhere, someone holds the missing piece. Until then, the mesa keeps its secret, and the wind that uncovered bones may one day carry a name. You've reached the end of tonight's descent into the unknown. But some stories don't let go just because the video stops. If any of these cases stayed with you, a detail you can't unhear, a moment you can't quite shake, don't turn away from that feeling. Follow it. Subscribe to keep exploring the mysteries that refuse to die, the cases left behind by time, and the shadows that truth can't seem to touch. Tell me in the comments, which case struck you the hardest? Which one made you stop and think about the world a little differently? Like the video if you want more deep dives into the places where fact feels like fiction and silence carries its own kind of threat. And if you have a story, a memory that never sat right, a crime that happened near you, a moment so strange it still keeps you awake, you're always welcome to share it. Send it to the business email in the channel bio, and your experience may become part of a future episode. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for stepping into the dark with me tonight. Until next time, remember, the shadows don't disappear when you stop looking. They're only waiting. And remember, the dark awaits.